الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and we're still discussing matter that he titled under the chapter of Nawaqil al-Wudu, so matters that nullifies one wudu. So he's mentioning some hadith pertaining to that topic regarding of those matters that are said to be by some of the ulama that nullifies one wudu. So we'll be picking up by discussing two hadith in this session, discussing first the hadith of Talq ibn Ali being the first hadith, and the second hadith of Busra bint Safwan. So these will be the two hadith that will be covered regarding of this matter that is related to those things that nullifies one wudu. So we have the hadith to be read, and then we go through a discussion of the hadith. Bi'awnillahi ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith 67, narrated Talq bin Ali radiallahu anhu. A man said, I touched my penis. Or he said, must a man who touched his penis during the prayer perform wudu, ablution? The Prophet ﷺ replied, no, it is only a part of your body. Reported by Al-Khamsa. Ibn Hibban graded it Sahih, and Ibn Madini said, it is better than the hadith of Busra, which follows. Hadith 68, narrated Busra bin Safwan radiyallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, he who touches his penis must perform ablution. Reported by Al-Khamsa, and At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Hibban graded it Sahih. Al-Bukhari said that it is the most authentic hadith concerning this issue.
So these are the hadith that have been mentioned regarding of the discussion relating to things that nullifies one wudu, and in particular the author rahimahullah wished to cover the topic of things that nullifies one wudu, and in particular touching of one private parts. So touching of the private area, does this nullifies one wudu or not? So this is the discussion that we'll be having with these two hadith. So he mentioned the first hadith, to the hadith of Talq ibn Ali radiyallahu anhu. قال رجل مسأت ذكري أو قال الرجل يمس ذكره في الصلاة. So he mentioned that a man, I've mentioned that he touched his private parts, or it is said that a person that he mentioned that he touched his private area while he was in the salat. Then he mentioned عليه wudu, is it upon him to perform wudu? فقال النبي عليه السلام the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned لا إنما هي بضعة منك, that is only but a piece of flesh from yourselves. أخرجه الخمسة وصححه ابن هبان وقال ابن مديني, يعني علي ibn Madini, هو أحسن من hadith Busra. So Ali ibn Madini rahimahullah, that he stated that this hadith of Talq ibn Ali, it is better, more suited, it is better than that of the hadith of Busra. As for the hadith of Busra, will be the second hadith in this discussion, where the author rahimahullah he mentioned, and Busra bint Safwan radiyallahu anha, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من مس ذكره فليتوضأ, that the one who touches his private parts, then he should make wudu. أخرجه الخمسة وصححه الترمذي وابن حبان وقال البخاري رحمه الله هو أصح شيء في هذا باب. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he mentions that this hadith is the most reliable in this or the most reliable hadith on this topic. So these are those hadith that discuss this topic that the author somewhat mentioned too, but there's other hadith related to this topic. So as for the first of those things that we'll discuss is these two narrators. So they mentioned these two hadith, discussing each of them separately. So you find that these hadith, there's a lengthy discussion between the ulama of hadith regarding the judgment on these hadith. So as for the first hadith that is mentioned here, that's hadith that is mentioned, this hadith, they mention rawahu al-khamsa wa sahahu ibn Hibban. So he mentioned al-khamsa. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, when he mentioned khamsa, then what he meant by this, Abu Dawood, the hadith also in that Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So the hadith can be found amongst these books of hadith, which the author here he mentioned that al-khamsa, which as we stated will be Abu Dawud. So the hadith in the Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah. Also the hadith can be found with Ibn Hibban in his Sahih. Also the hadith can be found in Tahawi and others that have collected this hadith. So you find that many have collected this particular hadith that have been mentioned here. So they mentioned that overall, that hadith, the place that can be found other than Abu Dawud, as we mentioned, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, also the hadith in the Ahmad, also added to these 5, as we stated in the Ibn Hibban. Also the hadith can be found in other books of hadith, Daraqutni, Tahawi, in his book Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, also Al-Hakim, Wal-Bayhaqi. So many of the books, so these are of those who have narrated this particular hadith. So there's as we mentioned, that there's a discussion regarding this hadith, of the discussion between the ulama regarding so that's regarding concerning of what have been mentioned regarding this hadith. So as for the first thing regarding the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, that we had a discussion regarding this particular hadith, where they mentioned that of the ulama who have authenticated the hadith of Talq. So they said generally amongst the ulama of hadith, there's a discussion regarding one of the narrators, who is Qais ibn Talq. So Qais ibn Talq ibn Ali. So you find that Qais ibn Talq narrate there's some discussion regarding this particular narrator of this hadith. So the focus of this hadith, it centers around this particular narrator, who's Qais ibn Talq ibn Ali, who narrates upon his father Talq ibn Ali. So they mentioned that as for some of the ulama, that they have mentioned this hadith, that they have authenticated this hadith, or they all the hadith to be maqbool, which the hadith is Hasan. So some mention hadith it is Hasan, some mention hadith it is Sahih, but many are more inclined towards the grading of the hadith being Hasan. So of those who have authenticated the hadith or the hadith to be Sahih, we have Omar ibn Ali al-Fallas, also Tahawi, Ibn Hibban, Tabarani, Ibn al-Hazm. So of those ulama who are the hadith to be Sahih, so those who authenticate the hadith of the hadith being Sahih, again, Ibn Fallas, Tahawi, Ibn Hibban, Tabarani, Ibn Hazm. Then our next group amongst the ulama, that they hold this hadith to be Hasan. So of those who hold the hadith to be Hasan, or graded this hadith as Hasan, the hadith of Talq, that they mention amongst them Ibn Qattan. So and also you'll find of contemporary Sheikh Albani, also Shuaib Arnaud. So those are the ulama who have somewhat hold this hadith to be authentic. So of the ulama who hold this hadith to be authentic, that list of the names that we had mentioned. Then similarly, we have Arab the ulama who hold the hadith to be daif, based upon a discussion regarding Qais ibn Talq. Qais ibn Talq, that so of those who hold the hadith to be daif, we have Imam Shafi, Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abu Zur'a al-Razi, Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, and Ibn Jawzi, that all this hadith to be daif. So of those ulama who takes the hadith to be daif, that again Shafi, Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abu Zur'a al-Razi, Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, also amongst them Ibn al-Jawzi. So you have that discussion regarding this particular hadith. Of those who also, then you mentioned that of the ulama, that An-Nawawi rahimahullah have somewhat state, Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah have somewhat state regarding concerning that the ulama are in agreement regarding this hadith being daif. But the ulama have corrected of those who have corrected it and said that's not the case, that you have akhta, that you have made an error regarding haka ittifaq ala da'fi, where of the ulama that they have clarified that the judgment that have been passed by An-Nawawi rahimahullah, that there's an ittifaq, an agreement between the ulama on this hadith being daif, that is not the case. That is not the case. So as we mentioned, that Qais ibn Talq, you have a look, there's a discussion regarding this particular narrator. This is more concerning ilm al-hadith and the more somewhat detail. So you find that of the ulama regarding Qais ibn Talq, of those who hold him to be, that is yawathiqu, and also those who all that is majhul, and those who all mention is daif. So of those who mention is a thiqa, that is a reliable narrator. Those who say is majhul or tajhil, that and also those who say fihi daf, that there is weakness in this narrator. So of those who all him to be of the thiqat, we have Yahya ibn Ma'in, all him to be thiqa. Al-Ijli, also all him to be thiqa. So based upon this, that those who incline towards authenticating hadith, because of the likes of Yahya ibn Ma'in and Al-Ijli, all him to be of those who are said to be thiqa, so of a reliable, credible narrator. Then of those who mentioned fihi jahala, Ash-Shafi rahimahullah. So the second group regarding this narrator Qais ibn Talq, Ash-Shafi rahimahullah mentioned jahalo, that he all him to be someone who's unknown. Then of those who somewhat have, then you have others who have spoken about this narrator but somewhat inclined towards him being daif. So you have mutakallim, alladhina yatakallamuna fi, of those who have spoken about this person. Again, that Abu Atim al-Razi, Abu Zur'a al-Razi has spoken about this particular narrator. Even Yahya ibn Ma'in also has statements against him. So Yahya ibn Ma'in also has statement against Talq. So you have statements for and against him. Then he mentioned regarding أكثر الناس فيه ولا يحتج به, that he mentioned فقد أكثر الناس فيه, يعني that the many are spoken about this person. Then he mentioned ولا يحتج به, and is not taken as an evidence, is not taken as reliable. Then as we mentioned, Abu Zur'a wa Abu Hatim, that also spoken, as we mentioned, ليس مما تكون به حجة. So of their statement of this person, their critique of this narrator, their criticism, they mentioned ليس ممن تكون به حجة, that is not of those that is not considered to be for hujjah, as a reliable source, Then also you find the likes of Ad-Daraqutni. I've said regarding this person ليس بقوي. So Daraqutni rahimahullah, I've said regarding Qais ibn Talq, ليس بقوي, is not someone who's strong. So they mentioned that overall, that and looking at the narrator, if we were to add all that have been said about him, whether those who are for, who all him to be thiqa, all him to be reliable and credible, those who all him to be daif, and also those all that have other statements regarding this narrator, that they kind of somewhat, all of those who mention that, is hadith of the level of what they call that la bas bihi, that is hadith is like in the level of acceptability. So his hadith is somewhat, if taking all those statements, then that is like in between, where he's not completely weak, where he's dismissed, nor is he of thiqat, that of the most reliable sources. So he's like in between. So he's a medium level narrator. So they mention that of those who mentioned Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that all him to be suduq. So he falls in the category of what is called suduq, which would be a medium level regarding a narrator, where his narrating are taken, but to the level of hadith may be deemed to be hasan, in the category of hadith being hasan, not to the highest level of the hadith being sahih, nor to the lowest of the hadith being daif. So that's concerning this particular narrator. We mentioned that a discussion regarding this narrator. Then the next matter they discuss regarding this hadith of Talq ibn Ali, that as for this narrator, this Sahabi, who is Talq ibn Ali, that his kunya is Abu Ali. So his kunya is Abu Ali. His name, Talq ibn Ali, ibn Talq, ibn Amr, that is also yaqal Talq ibn Ali, ibn Munzir, ibn Qais, Suhaymi, Yamami. So this is what is his name. So that is Talq ibn Ali, ibn Talq ibn Amr, yaqal. Also it is said regarding him that is Talq ibn Ali, ibn al-Munzir, ibn Qais, al-Suhaymi, al-Yamami. Then also that is said to be from the Sahaba. Also this particular narrator, that it is mentioned that he was of those who were involved in helping the Prophet of Islam regarding فقال أبي إذا بنيت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المسجد المدينة, that he mentioned that بنيت, that of those who were that he was involved in the building of the Prophet of Islam masjid in Medina. So he was involved and assisted the Prophet ﷺ in building the masjid in Medina. Then, so that's concerning that particular narrator. Then, as we mentioned, we have discussed regarding the hadith, where of those who have so that's concerning this particular hadith, we mentioned that the discussion is regarding of this hadith, what is said regarding Qais ibn Talq, and we have mentioned that this that discussion regarding that particular narrator. They even mentioned Ahmad al-Hanbal of those who hold the hadith to be da'if, as mentioned by some of the ulama, that Ahmad al-Hanbal rahimahullah also of those who hold the hadith to be da'if. So that's concerning, and Talq ibn Halis is said to be of the tabi'i al-thiqat, of the tabi'i, and he's on the discussion. As we have said, and now rahimahullah, of those things to be mindful of, قال now rahimahullah, إنه دايف باتفاق الحفاظ, that he mentioned that the Hufad, the ulama of hadith, that they all this hadith, that all it regarding, as mentioned, that that regarding concerning the weakness, that that's not the case, as claimed by An-Nawawi rahimahullah, that you find that Ibn Abdul Hadi al-Hanbali, that قال أخطأ من حكى اتفاق على ضعفي, that there's an error have been committed by those who have claimed that there's an agreement regarding his weakness. So as for the hadith, the general meaning of the hadith, that is mentioned that a man that he came to the Prophet ﷺ, or a man that he asked regarding that the situation, the case if he was to touch his private parts. Then it mentioned that lamistu dhakari, that if I was to touch my dhakar, then it mentioned الرجل يمس ذكره في الصلاة, if a person was to touch of his private parts in salah. So yeah, that Ibn Taymiyyah had some ishkal regarding mentioned fi salat, that the person normally touches, and mentioned that the touch of the private parts in the salat, that the person wouldn't touching the word lams or mas is mean a person actually touch with his bare hand without any form of barrier. So the person actually, while in the salat, that he touched his private parts or his hands went over that area. So it seemed more like the person, his hand went over that area, but you have that ishkal regarding this salat, where the person actually touched his hand, touched his private parts while in the salat, or it occurred before, but he went and prayed. So it occurred either before he touched his private parts, then he went into the salat. Then I mentioned, فَعَلَيْهِ wudu, is this upon him to perform al-wudu? Then the Prophet ﷺ قال, لا إنما هو bid'atun mink. I mentioned that towards the bid or bad'atun minka, so it can be pronounced both ways, bad'atun mint or bid'atun mink. Some narration it mentioned in Abu Dawood mudgha. So some narration in the word of bad or bid, some mention mughdha. So difference in word in both, that clarifying that is the piece of flesh from the person. So that's concerned. The Prophet mentioned la innama huwa is like a piece of your flesh, meaning that it does not nullify your wudu. Just as if you any touching of your ears, touching of your feet, touching of your hands, touching of any part of your body, it does not nullify your wudu. So in this case, the same thing apply. So this hadith is generally, as we'll discuss further, that is used by those of the ulama who take the position regarding that touching of the private parts does not nullify one wudu. So they mention that this is the hadith that they use as their evidence, and we'll discuss that matter more in details. The next hadith that have been mentioned, the hadith of Busra bint Safwan. So again I mentioned in the Al-Khamsa. So this hadith have been narrated by Abu Dawood. That is also in that Nasa'i, Ahmed, Malik, Ibn Hibban. That I've mentioned hadith also at Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and others who have narrated this hadith. So this hadith that also that in the Al-Khamsa, and then he mentioned that of those who have authenticated this hadith, you have At-Tirmidhi and also Ibn Hibban. And Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned, so Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, that when he was asked by At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, فقال هو أصح شيء في هذا باب. This is the most authentic hadith in this on this topic, that indicating that this hadith with Imam Bukhari is more authentic than the hadith of Talq ibn Ali. So that's concerning the hadith here that is mentioned. So before going to the hadith, that as for the Sahabiya, who's Busra bint Safwan, Rata'ala anha, that her name is Busra bint Safwan ibn Nawfal ibn Asad ibn Abdul Uzza al-Qurashi al-Asadi. So again, her name is Sahabiya, Busra bint Safwan ibn Nawfal ibn Asad ibn Abdul Uzza al-Qurashi al-Asadi. And that she's a relative, she's related to Waraka ibn Nawfal. So also she's a relative of Waraka ibn Nawfal that also is like related to Khadija Rata'ala anha, where in the early days of the Prophet Islam, the mission of Islam first started, that his wife Khadija to the Prophet ﷺ, to Waraka ibn Nawfal regarding what have occurred regarding the start, regarding revelation being revealed upon him. So this, so Busra is also a family of Waraka ibn Nawfal. Then also they mentioned that that she of the early ones to accept Islam, as mentioned by Shafi rahimahullah, laha sabiqa qadima wa hijra. That Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he mentioned that of those who came to Islam early, accepted Islam early, and also of those who made al-hijrah, قال Ibn Hibban قال كانت من المهاجرات, that she was of the muhajarat, of those who made the migration amongst the females. Then also you find that Musab ibn Zubair قال كان من المبايعات, of those who also made the bay'ah, also those who made al-bay'ah to the Prophet ﷺ. So Busra is of those who accepted Islam early. So that's something in brief regarding this Sahabiya, Busra bint Safwan Rata'ala anha. So as we discussed concerning the hadith, that the source of this hadith, as I mentioned, akhrajahu al-khamsa, then I mentioned of those who have authenticated the hadith. So also this hadith this hadith is a discussion between the ulama regarding the appropriate grading of the hadith. So the appropriate grading of this hadith, there's also a discussion between the ulama that the hadith with this particular hadith have various narrations of this hadith. The hadith also in the Al-Muwatta and other sources, many sources that have narrated this particular hadith. So of those who kind of somewhat discuss regarding this particular hadith, that after discussing there's an inqita, that I mentioned is a breakage in this isnad, this particular isnad that they mentioned. So that is mentioned by Nasai rahimahullah qala lam yasma Hisham an abihi hadha hadith. So the criticism of this hadith is that they mention a hadith of inqita, that there's a breakage in the isnad, meaning that Hisham, one of the narrators, who was Hisham ibn Awra, did not hear from his father, Awra ibn Zubair. So Awra ibn Zubair, that he did not hear from his father. So you have that discussion regarding this hadith, what is mentioned, man massa dhakarahu falyatawadda. So this hadith is very straightforward and clear and direct regarding, as mentioned, man massa dhakarahu, the one who touches his private parts, then he should perform al-wudu. So as we mentioned, that of the criticism of the hadith, that those who have put forward of them, and Nasa'i have stated, lam yasma Hisham min abihi hadha hadith, that Hisham did not receive this hadith from his father, did not hear this hadith from his father. And as mentioned by Naqlahu al-Zaylahi fi Nasb al-Raya. Then also that At-Tahab rahimullah in his book Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, he kind of somewhat rebutted what is mentioned or what is said or claimed by An-Nasa'i. You mentioned innama akhadahu Hisham, and that also At-Tahab mentioned that this hadith also is, he mentioned innama akhadahu Hisham and Abi Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Awra ibn Hazim and Hisham ibn Awra. So that's you have that discussion regarding Hisham in from his father mentioned, but it is stated that Hisham, that in some narration he kind of somewhat clarify, as I mentioned, that he heard from his father mentioned, and Hisham ibn Urwa قال حدثني Abi Bakr ibn Muhammad, and also in other narration he mentioned directly that he heard from his father. So he heard from his father directly this particular hadith, So this it remove the claim of those who state that he did not hear from his father. And also the second claim against this hadith, that they mention also that there's an inqita, that also between regarding concerning that Al-Urra ibn Zubair and Subra and Al-Busra. So also you have that claim also. All those claims are somewhat you have clear that he heard the hadith as in other narrations. So this hadith that it mentioned that an Isham قال حدثني, that Isham should that he actually heard the hadith from his father. In some narration they mentioned قال in the Musnad Ahmad bin Hanbal قال Isham, and Isham قال حدثني أبي. So he can somewhat clarify in other narration that he heard directly from his father قال حدثني أبي, and Busra bin Safwan, and his father that he heard also from Busra ibn Safwan. So the ulama clarify that matter regarding the claim that he did not hear from his father. So regarding concerning this hadith, that amongst the ulama, that regarding concerning the ulama regarding their view on this hadith, regarding their hukum on this hadith, of the ulama of authenticated hadith. So they mentioned At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, also Al-Bukhari, also Ibn Hibban, that have authenticated this particular hadith. Also Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So they said we have authenticated hadith. We have Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ibn Ma'in, Tirmidhi, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, Darakutni, Al-Hakim, Al-Bayhaqi, Abu Bakr, Al-Hazimi, Ibn Hazm, Ibn Jawzi, An-Nawawi, and also others. So we have authenticated this hadith. And also of contemporary, we have like Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Muqbil, of contemporaries, and also Sheikh Shuaib Arnaud. So of those mashaykh that are involved in the study of critiquing of hadith and the books of hadith of our time, of those we have Sheikh Albani, who authenticated hadith, also Sheikh Muqbil, who have authenticated hadith, and also Sheikh Al-Arnaud, Sheikh Shuaib Arnaud, and others. So overall I mentioned the hadith is authentic. This hadith is authentic. So both hadith are taken to be authentic. The first hadith that's considered to be Hasan, and the second hadith that is considered to be Sahih. So as for the discussion regarding what can be extracted or taken from this hadith. So a discussion between the ulama regarding their study of this hadith and the ahkam that can be taken from this hadith. So the purpose of the mawdu of this hadith, so the topic of this hadith is discussing, does touching of one's private parts with a hand nullifies one wudu? Does touching of the private parts with one's hands, does it nullifies one wudu? So on this matter, that you find that a difference between the ulama on this matter. So you have different ways regarding outer layout regarding the aqwal of the ulama, as you have various aqwal. So they have mentioned that as for the aqwal of the ulama on this matter, the first opinion, they have stated, that the ulama mentioned that, that one's wudu is nullified, intiqad al-wudu bimassa dhakar, that a person wudu is invalid by touching of his private parts. So touching of the private parts, the private parts, it nullifies one's wudu. They mention that of those of this view, it is narrated upon the likes of Omar al-Khattab, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Abi Hurairah, Aisha, among the Sahaba. So of the Sahaba that have been narrated upon them, that they are of this view, that they have mentioned many of the Sahabas. So we had mentioned Omar al-Khattab, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Abi Hurairah, and also Aisha. Others among the Salaf, they have from the Tabi'een, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Ata, Urra, Az-Zuhri, Malik, Awza'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ishaq, Al-Shafi'i, Abu Thur, Al-Muzani. So they have taken the position that touching of one's wudu nullifies, touching of one's private parts nullifies one wudu. And they use as an evidence to prove this point, they mention the hadith of Busra. They mention the hadith of Busra. And also they state that the hadith of Busra, They find many of the books of hadith that I mentioned the hadith of Busra, that they give a precedent to that hadith based upon they take the position that the hadith is more authentic and the view of Imam Bukhari is more precise compared to Ibn Madini regarding which hadith is stronger. So they mentioned that Bukhari is viewed that this hadith of Busra is the stronger hadith compared to that of the hadith of Talq. And also you find that the hadith of Busra, you have many other narration that somewhat support this. So they mention from many companions who have somewhat supported the hadith of Talq that have been mentioned about the hadith of Al-Busra. So they have mentioned regarding concern over many companions who also have given similar narration of the hadith of Busra. So you find many other companions that their narration is very similar to that of the narration of Busra regarding that touching of the private parts nullifies one wudu. So among those Sahabi, they said Shawahid that have similar narration of that of Busra bin Safwan, that touching of the private part nullify wudu. They mention Jabir, Abu Huraira, Habiba, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As, Zayd ibn Khalid, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqas, Aisha, Salama, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Ali ibn Talq, Nu'man ibn Bashir, Anas, Ubay ibn Kab, Muawiyah, Ibn Abu Hayda, Qabisa, Urwa bint Anis. So you find that, or Ibn Unais, you find that many, over 90, over close to 17 other companions who have narrated similar to what have been stated by Busra bint Safwan. And they mentioned that the hadith of Talq, you find no other companions who have supported this. So only that hadith is the only hadith where there's no other narration from other companions. No other narration from other companions. As for the hadith of Busra, you find many other companions, over 17 or more, who have narrated similar to that of Busra. So based upon that, some of the ulama, they give strength and precedent where they take the hadith of Busra to be the stronger view that touching of the private parts nullifies one wudu. So that's concerning one, that is the first position. The second position is those who take the position that Adam inqita, that Adam al-naqal wudu, that one's wudu is not invalidated, so one wudu is not broken by touching of the private parts. So touching the private parts does not nullifies one wudu. That is a view that is mentioned, that is stated to be the view of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ibn Mas'ud, Hudayfa, Ammar, from amongst the Sahaba. So amongst the Sahaba who take the position that touching of the private parts does not nullifies one wudu, breaks one wudu, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ibn Mas'ud, Hudayfa, Ammar. And also Ibn Munzir, Aidan, I've said it, the view of Ibn Abbas, Imran ibn Hussein, Abi Darda, also Al-Rabi', also the method of Al-Thawri, and also Abu Hanifa and his companions, Ibn Sahnun, or Ibn Munzir. So those are those who are more inclined towards the view, or have taken the position that touching of the private parts does not nullifies one wudu. The evidence that they use the hadith of Talq ibn Ali. So they give more precedent to the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, and we'll discuss that matter. Then we have the third opinion is the opinion of those who say it is istihbab. It is mustahab, is preferred, but not wajib. So renew one wudu if touching of the private parts is preferred to renew one wudu, but it's not wajib. It's not something which is compulsory to be done, but preferred to be done. And that's the narration of Imam Ahmed. Also the position taken by Ibn Khuzaymah. Also the view that is taken by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and of contemporary Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen also is of the view that it is preferred, mustahab, istihbab, to renew one's wudu, but it's not something which is wajib. Then the fourth opinion that I mentioned, that they mentioned that yanqud, ينقض الوضوء إذا مس بشهوة. That the fourth opinion is that if the person touches the private parts with any form of desire, then his wudu is invalid. If there is without any desire, his wudu is still intact. So they make a distinction using shahwa, desire. If that is there present, where the person touches his private parts with any form of desire, then the person wudu is invalid. If that's not the case, that's absent, that's not there, then the person wudu is still valid. And I mentioned that here, riwayah and Ahmed, says the narration Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, also a riwayah and Imam Malik, and also that's the view that Shaykh Albani rahimahullah in his book Tamam Minna is more inclined towards. So and also that others have stated that this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah. That others have mentioned that this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah, and also the qawl that Shaykh Bassam that is more inclined towards. So these are the aqwal of the ulama regarding this matter. So you have those opinions regarding how to consolidate these hadith. So how to harmonize between these hadith. So they have mentioned that of those who give precedent or say that it nullifies one wudu, then they either take the position regarding that that this hadith, it nullifies the hadith of Busra, it nullifies the hadith of Talq ibn Ali. So the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, they see it as it was applicable at one point, but then that ruling was removed and the precedent was given to the hadith of Busra. Of those who mentioned that by way of tarjih, that the hadith come to those two hadith that they are opposing each other, and the stronger by way of isnad is that, or its chain is that of the hadith of Busra, so they take that hadith. And also of those who, and of some of those ones who hold the hadith of Talq to be daif. So they kind of somewhat, they take a tarjih that the more sounder view is that of the hadith of Busra. And also they mentioned that with this also, that the hadith of Talq is upon what is the asl, what is the normal ruling, and the hadith of Busra is additional, a change in the ruling, so it have additional information, which is a change in the original ruling. So they said that hadith is given precedent because of it having an additional ruling, what from that which is said away from what they call baral asliya, which is something being on its original ruling, something being upon its original ruling. So the hadith of Busra, it changed that ruling to make it something which is that nullifies one wudu. Those who mentioned a nask, that the discussion regarding of those who said the hadith is abrogated, is a rule of abrogation applies, that that also have been criticized by not knowing which of those hadith came first and which came last. So that hadith, to claim that one hadith is given, one hadith nullifies the other, and the rule of abrogation applies, is first being able to clarify clearly which of those hadith came first and which came after. And that's somewhat difficult, and no clear precedent or no clear dalil in this case. So even though one of the narrators may accept Islam before the other, it doesn't necessarily mean that their hadith is first and the other came after. So also of those who take the tarjih, that they mention the hadith of Busra bin Safwan, they give a precedent over the hadith of Talq ibn Ali. And as we mentioned, that of those of contemporary, that they mention also San'ani, the author of Subul Salam, is also of that view. So and also of contemporaries also Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz. So Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, that these are the ulama who incline towards the hadith of it nullifies one wudu. So that's concerning the path that they have taken. And I mentioned, so that's concerning that discussion between the ulama. So the hadith, the view, it lies regarding concern that what is the correct opinion on this, then it varies. So both hadith authentic, those who try to combine between both hadith, and that's the qawl of those who kind of somewhat more inclined towards in combining to harmonize between both hadith, is that one do so by taking a position with a middle path, which is one hadith mentioned the person wudu is invalid, and the other mentioned that's not the case. So a middle ruling is that is something which is mustahab. The middle point ruling is to say it is something which is mustahab, which is between saying it is completely the hadith of Talq ibn Ali that says it doesn't nullify the person wudu at all, and the one of Busra that says it nullifies one wudu. Then they can somewhat take a middle rule, which is to combine between both. Then we say it is mustahab. It is mustahab, as one show a degree of allowance, and one say it is not. So a middle path is to not say it is to say it is mustahab. It is mustahab to renew one's wudu, but not wajib. As for the view regarding shahwa being the deciding factor, then there's no, that is a matter which is relative. That's a matter, and there's no clear evidence regarding so shahwa that the person will nullify his wudu regarding a shahwa touching the private part if there's any type of discharge, as in the case of a lamps of a female. So if there's no discharge, then the person wudu is still intact. So that's going to somewhat refute the view regarding the position that if shahwa is involved, which is the fourth opinion they mention, if there's shahwa involved, then the person wudu is invalid, and if there's no shahwa, then the person wudu is still valid. So there's no clear. So that's concerning that absence and present is something which is a difficult call to be made. So overall, that the matter go back to of those opinion, Allahu alam, that either the first opinion that the person wudu is invalid, or the third that it is mustahab but not wajib. So Bab al-Ihtiyat is for the person to follow maybe the first opinion, but that's the discussion between the ulama. So you might find a person, if you were to ask them for the tulab al-ilm from the ulama, they might go to either say one of those opinions, the person wudu is valid, if touching the private parts, and use the hadith of Talq, or those who say the person wudu is invalid based on the hadith of Busra and its other narrations, or those who kind of someone take a middle part that's saying it is mustahab. So you may most likely hear one of those three opinions regarding touching of the wudu. So it varies depending on the alim or the person talib al-ilm, that one return back to, but overall that ihtiyat, then a person will go to view that the person wudu is invalid. By touching the private parts, the person wudu is invalid. So that's concerned that matter. You have other extent, another discussion regarding that matter where they discuss that's related to this, that regarding does the same thing apply? The hadith mentioned dhakar, which is concerned that goes back to the male organ, but would the same thing apply to a female? So what's the ruling regarding a female? Of the ulama mentioned that the same thing, those who restrict the ruling to male, but I mentioned there's other hadiths that mention regarding female, regarding concerning farj of a female, as some narration mention, man massa farjuhu falyatawadda. So that mentioned that other narration that it mentioned other things concerning the hadith that mentioned the hadith of Sumra, the hadith of Amr ibn Shuaib, and Abi and Jaddihi, قال رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام أيما رجل مس فرجه فليتوضأ. Any man that touches his private parts, then he should renew his wudu. Then I mention أيما imratin, any woman that massat farjuha, that touches her private parts, فلتتوضأ, then she should perform al-wudu. So that hadith that they mention in the Ahmad ibn Hanbal in his Musnad, Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, and I mentioned that some of the ulama all the hadith to be isnad, the isnad to be Hasan, of the ulama who all this hadith to be Hasan, that they mentioned based upon this particular hadith that of the ulama Al-Hazimi, Ahmed Shakir, and others who all this hadith to be Hasan, they mentioned that it's typically mentioned regarding al-rajul wal-imra. So they mentioned that both, if they were to touch their private parts, then their wudu is invalid. So based upon this, of the ulama who take the position that the ruling applies to both male and female. Both male and female. So that's the main of the discussion regarding that particular hadith. Then you have also other things that are included. So other masail that is taken from this, that it discuss that of which portion of the person, and if it touches his private parts, it nullifies one wudu, whether him or her. So which portion of the hand, if it was to touch the private part, then a person wudu is invalid. On this matter, I said that the palm of the hand, of those who mentioned the palm of the hand, but if the back, then no. So you have those who said that's the palm of the hand. If not the back, only the palm, then of those who mentioned with the back or the palm of the hand. Then of those who mentioned Imam Malik rahimullah, wa Layth ibn Sa'd, wa Imam Shafi, wa Ishaq, that they mentioned that أنه لا ينقل المسه إلا بباطن كف, that only the palm, if this touches the private parts, then this is what nullify the person wudu. As for the person ظاهر كف, as for the back of his hand, they mention ليس بآلة المس, then it does not apply. It does not nullify the person wudu. So for them, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Layth ibn Sa'd, Ishaq, that they take the position that is only the palm of the hand. If it was to touch the person's private parts, then his wudu is invalid. As for the back of his hand, then no. As for the back of his hand, then they said no. The second view on this, the view taken by Ahmad bin Hanbal, Al-Awzahi, Ata, and the view taken by Ibn Hazm rahimullah, أنه لا فرق بين الظاهر الكف وباطن, that they make no distinction between the back of the hand or the palm. So as the person, anything of the person hand that touches his private parts, it nullifies wudu, whether by the way of the back or the front. And I mentioned that in some narration of the hadith, it mentioned إذا أفضى أحدكم بيدي إلى فرجه ليس بينهما سترا فيتوضأ. So the hadith mentioned إذا أفضى. So they mentioned the word أفضى, meaning that the person is to touch of something according to them. We have that discussion regarding afda, that it means just the palm, or I mean the entire hand. So they mention the person that they state that with this view that whether the front or the back of the hand, the person wudu is invalid. So you have that discussion between the ulama. Then also, if the person's arm was the touch of his private parts, then I want to mention ذهب جمهور of the ulama أنه لا ينتقض الوضوء, that the ذراع, which will be the arm, that touching of the private parts does not nullify the person wudu. Even though some take that position, but jumhur of the ulama take the position that it does not. But you find Ahmad bin Hanbal wal Awzahi for riwayah that the harm, if it was to touch the person, the private parts, it nullifies one wudu. But Jumhur says otherwise. They discuss the next matter, Mas al-Farj al-Ghayr. If the person was to touch someone else's private parts, if one was to touch another person's private parts, does that nullify one wudu or not? That they discuss regarding that on this matter. You find that ذهب الشافعية والحنابلة إلى أنه ينقل الوضوء. By touching someone else's private parts, it nullifies one wudu. So a husband was to touch his wife's private area, or vice versa, then this nullifies the person wudu. There's a direct touching of the private area with the bare hand, or without anything in between, or any form of partition. So the person will directly touch another person's private parts, then this nullifies one wudu. So they mentioned if the person touching, they mentioned the hadith of Busra, they concerning man massa dhakaru, for the person who touches a private parts. So they mentioned whether his or someone else's, then his wudu is invalid. Whether his or another person, then his wudu is invalid. When I mentioned that that the narration regarding man massa dhakarahu, that so I mentioned you have two narration, man massa adhakar, فليتوضأ. Then you have man massa dhakarahu. So you have those two narration of this hadith. I have many narration of those narration of Busra. man massa al-dhakar. So they mention man massa al-dhakar. They say any private parts. But that narration, that is somewhat weak. That narration in the Nasa'i and fihi da'f. It is weak. According to some, they mention a reason regarding the weakness because of Marwan ibn Hakam. But Marwan ibn Hakam, they attack his adala. But overall, he mentioned his hadith that is not as weak as they say. It is not as weak as he narrated the hadith before he, in his earlier days when he was there. So Marwan ibn Hakam, that some mention that he's daif, but there's some tafsir on that matter where he's not completely daif, as some claim. So that narration that of those who say touching anyone's private parts, it nullifies one's wudu. So as we mentioned, that touching of the female female touching the female private parts by her, that I mentioned that Imam Shafi, Ahmed, that mentioned that even for the female touching her private parts, or another female, that nullifies her wudu. And that's a position taken by Imam Shafi, and also riwayah Imam Ahmed, that yantaqil al-wudu, touching a female touching her own private parts. But Abu Hanifa, wal Malik, another narration, Ahmed bin Hanbal, that mentioned la yantaqad al-wudu, that touching of a female touching her own private parts, it does not nullify her wudu. So they mentioned that the narration mentioned dhakarahu or farjuha, indicating that goes back to the person themselves. It really is only, that it really concerned that the farj, that also of the female, the farj of the female. Ayyuma ibrat massat farjuha fatatawadda. So some narration mentioned that if the female was to touch her own private parts, then she also performs wudu. Then you have the discussion between some of the ulama regarding that touching even a child. So that the hadith of those who said touching of a child private parts, does that nullify one wudu? Of those who said no, and those who say yes. So the extent of this discussion between some of the ulama, they have discussed some of the book regarding touching that of a bahima. So I mentioned that of the ulama, they discuss regarding touching the private parts of an animal. So those who mentioned that touching the private parts, this hadith is in reference to an Adami, to a human being. Others who mention that his ruling also extend to that of animals. So a person who touch an animal private parts, then also their wudu is invalid. So you have that discussion between the ulama where they extend this matter to various, where it includes that of animals and their private parts being touched by a person. Does this nullify one wudu or not? Of those who say yes and those who say no. So that's also of the discussion between the ulama. That's also the part of the discussion between the ulama, even to the extent where some mentioned that if touching the private parts of a person, whether the person is alive or dead, whether the person's private parts is attached or unattached. So you have all that discussion between the ulama on this matter. So you have some, the discussion can be very detailed on this matter regarding touching of private parts. So as we mentioned, that in summary, you have those two hadith, one stating it does not, with the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, that touching of the private parts does not nullify one wudu. And we have a second hadith of Busra bint Safwan that indicated that touching of the private parts, it nullifies one wudu. Both hadith, on a discussion, overall, both hadith are said by most of the ulama to be authentic. The hadith of Talq, less authentic than that of, is said to be Hasan, and the hadith of Busra is said to be Sahih, so of a high level, higher grade in ruling. But overall, regarding how now to extract from these two hadith, that various approach of the ulama, and we have mentioned the aqwal of the ulama between those who say the person wudu is invalid in all case and circumstance of touching of one wudu. Those who mention a person wudu is not broken in all case and circumstance. Those who mention make a distinction regarding if the person touches a private parts with shahwa desire, then this nullifies the person wudu. If not, the person wudu is still intact. Those who mention that a person wudu that is it is mustahab for a person to renew his wudu, but not to the extent of wajib. So it's more preferred for a person to renew his wudu if he were to touch his private parts, but without to the level of being wujub. So you have those aqwal between the ulama on this matter, and also the extent regarding that the ruling applies to both male and female, with also of those who extend the matter to that even to a child. Those who say no, as the woman who cleans the child would do this regular. So they mention extent to the sense that they all that it does not. So you have these various aqwal between the ulama on this matter. So that inshallah ta'ala, as we said, that there's more lengthy discussion on this matter, we can somewhat stop at this point. And for those who wish to go further, then some of the books of fiqh that they go into more detail on this matter, and some of the books of shura hadith that they go in more detail. So those who wish to, they can go back to those books to get more further information regarding these masail. With this inshallah ta'ala will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر والحمد لله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.